I waited later in my life to have a child because there's so much fear built around that you can't do both. And when we finally decided to have a child, that is when my career took off, because I didn't have this obsession of, it was just like, and that's when I actually booked the dream role, and that I always wanted, and having a 2-month-old baby in your trailer and breastfeeding and learning the lines and not sleeping. But it's like, you have this fight in you and you're like, I am going to do this, and I'm going to show you all that I can do it, and I'm going to kick ass at this role, and I'm going to, do better than I ever have. So you can be a mother and be an actor, and a successful one.
I don't give a flying damn about you. I won't let you tell me what I can do. You can try to drown me, but my spirit is free, yeah, free, yeah. Generations, all my nations, all circle around me. So let's sing about it. Generations, all my nations, all circle around me. So let's sing about it.
Welcome to ReMATRIATE the Lens. So I'd love to start with Crystle. How did you get into this industry?
Well, I come from a family of performers. My mother, Georgina, was going to acting school in Edmonton, and her teacher said, hey, I think you have something here, so I suggest that you either move to New York or LA. And so she moved our whole family to California, and when I was 9 years old, I had an audition for a feature film called 3 Ninjas, Knuckle Up, and I booked my first big part at 9, and I fell in love with it, especially craft service at 9 years old. What? There's an unlimited table of snacks that you can have anything you want? I mean, yeah, and on the Paramount lot, like I was coming from Edmonton, and so I got lucky. We know that it's not that easy sometimes, and I ended up getting my first part at 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Dana?
I found my love of acting through dance, that performance aspect and telling stories through movement. And so when I got into acting, it felt like a natural transition. But growing up where I did in Selkirk, Manitoba, at the time, there was no opportunities for acting, and I didn't know it could be a possibility for someone like me. But when I moved to the city and did dance at York, I took an intro to acting class. And the professor said, you should give this a try. And I did, and I fell in love with it. And I'm so glad that I stuck with it. I did sit with it for a few years. And then I waited and got an agent, and then, gave it a go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Star?
My best friend and her family are all creatives, actors, writers. So my best friend encouraged me to audition for a play that her mom had written in our small town when I was 15. And I had never done anything like that before, and I was really shy as a kid. And then I ended up booking it with my best friend, and from there, her family said, well, what if you try this professionally? Maybe you'd really enjoy it. And I did have a lot of fun doing the play, and yeah, I've discovered that I really loved acting, and now I'm here. So
Yeah, you're here.
yeah, quite fortuitous, yeah.
Maika?
That's amazing. I feel like I kind of fell into it through my cousin, actually. My cousin works in film, and I was 19 and I was fairly lost. I was not sure of what I wanted to do. But there was a nationwide search, and my cousin said, you would be really good for this. And so I tried it, and I got the part. But I was also going to university at the time, so I had to kind of pick and choose which one I was going to do. And I chose acting. I was really, I think, grateful for the people that kind of pushed me to open those doors.
And I can't imagine what it's like as an Indigenous woman walking onto any of these sets. What are the challenges that come with that?
Well, it depends. I feel like if you're in an Indigenous film, the people, like the director, the producers, they're Indigenous. There's like a I got you kind of feeling. You know what I mean? I personally have never experienced the, racism on a set, but I have witnessed it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it depends on who's telling the story,
Right.
what kind of set you're walking on.
Yeah, I feel like very fortunate that I have never experienced anti-Indigenous racism on a set, but I think that's because now there's so much more Indigenous creators behind the lens. There's writers, producers, directors. So I've never outright witnessed it. And I think the, creators who came before us laid that groundwork for the climate it is today. Because of their work and advocacy and advocating for autonomy over our stories, that's why I can walk on a set now and not experience anti-Indigenous racism. So I'm grateful. I'm really, really grateful for the, all the Indigenous writers, directors, producers before us who put in that work.
Definitely. What about you two? When you step on those sets, is it different for you as an Indigenous woman?
My background is Inuit, and there's not many of us. It's a very small group of people within the framework of indigeneity. So stepping onto set is always a little hard for me because people understand First Nations and they don't really understand Inuit too much. So I kind of pop their bubble.
Okay. Star, what about you?
I mean, I'm mixed race, so I think that sometimes that factors in the sense that, like, I'm a bit more ambiguous, so I have a different lived experience than someone else who, looks a different way than I do. I was mindful of that. I think when I walk on sets, and I don't know about you guys, but I feel like one of the first things I always do, especially if it's not with people that I know already, I'm always kind of looking to make sure, okay, where are my people? Like, where are my people? And then I always feel the relief was, okay, there they are. Like, there's, someone, but sometimes there's not. And I had my first experience ever a couple of years ago on a set there was not a single Indigenous person or person of color. And it was definitely a very different experience. And it made me very, very grateful for the projects, which have been the majority of my career, that have had Native creatives in front and behind the camera. It's made me really grateful for all of that work. Yeah.
How do you handle when you're on one of those sets and you don't have your people?
Put your big girl panties on and trudge on through and hold your ground and take up your space and, of course, be professional because there's always going to be, I feel like, there's always a little something like, are they going to be on Indian time? Are they going to, you got to make sure that you're holding your own and you're walking on the set professional so that there's no reason for anybody to say anything.
Right.
Yeah.
I like the way that you said, like, taking space. I find that that's something, especially when there's not many Indigenous people on a set, that holding your own space and really finding that power within yourself is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember what your mama taught you.
I was on a set one time and it was my first bigger job. I remember the experience was so bad that I thought, am I even cut out for this? But it was the director who, I felt like he abused his power and made everyone around him feel small. And I was new at the time. And so I remember him yelling at me like, did anyone tell her where her mark is? I remember being like, oh my God, I'm gonna curl up now. Like, I remember going home and thinking like, is this for me? And I'm like, you know what? Any project that I take part in and that I create in the future, I'm never gonna make someone feel that way. I don't care if they're the lead role. I don't care if they're an extra, they're a day player. That is not how you treat people. And if that's how people are treating people, like that's not the project I wanna be a part of. But it's so tough because the Dana today would have advocated, but I was so much younger then and so scared to say something. But yeah, I feel like if there's any challenges that come about on a set now, I feel like I would use my voice. I'd definitely advocate for myself a lot better than what I did in the past in that first job.
Yeah. Crystle, you have the confidence to say this isn't okay. Have you always had that?
I think that just comes with maturity. And, I come from my mother's pretty strong. So I feel like I've learned a lot from her. And you have to speak up for your people. Who else is going to do it if it's not us, right? You have to speak up. You have to, we come from a very strong people, and especially being in a male-dominated industry, we have to hold our own and speak up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see other younger actresses, Indigenous actresses who you see aren't ready to take up that space? Do you, take it upon yourself to kind of corral them and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility as, stepping into the anti-era, right? You have to, because I know I had that. I had women who had my back, and I learned from them, and now it's my responsibility to pass that on, to the younger ones, the little chicklets, You gotta help them out and pass it on.
Have you all had somebody on set who kind of takes you aside and gives that guidance that Crystle does?
I wouldn't necessarily say on set, but in general, like other Indigenous women in the industry have definitely lent their support and guidance. Crystle recently, when I booked Bloodlines and I was working on it, and I was like, okay, this is my first job as a mom. Like, how does it work? What do you do? And she was so gracious to give me that advice. Because without that support, it can feel like such a solo experience.
Maika?
I find that there's enough cattiness already. We don't need to be catty with each other. There's enough of that in the world. We don't need to bring that into work. And I love meeting other people and connecting. And I think you just need to check your ego at the door.
So it's more of a sisterhood than
Yeah.
competition.
Yeah.
Because there aren't that many roles unless you're making them yourselves.
Mhm.
So yeah, have many of you found that, you are turning to that more creative part where making your own content because you need to fill that space and you need to fill the spaces for the people coming behind you?
Oh, yes. I mean, we get opportunities, but we don't get that many opportunities. And Indian country is so small, and yeah, absolutely sisterhood, but we are in a competitive business. So there is an element of like, everybody that's auditioning for the stuff, right? And it's like, it stings for a second when you don't get, oh man, but when one person eats, we all do. It's a victory for us all. And those opportunities are very far and few between. So absolutely have to create our own stuff, That's what we did with Bear Grease. We wanted something fun and exciting and cool and not a period piece or not something based on trauma, which is part of our reality. But we wanted to create something that was exciting and that would bring people joy. And I always wanted to play a part like that in theater. And so we took a chance and wrote this show called Bear Grease, and it was only supposed to be one show, and we thought let's give it a shot here. And 3 years later, we're on a 200 show,
Amazing.
and we're touring it all across the States and Canada. We just got invited to Off-Broadway next year. So as a creative, you try things and you take risks, and you don't know what's gonna hit. But you're like, I don't have this chance to play this role, so you write it yourself with help, right?
Yeah.
And support. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, but you get it out as an artist, right?
Is that how you view rematriation?
Yes, I think it's women taking control of our own narrative.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the
Yeah.
head there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, that word is like acknowledging and honoring women's contributions to film, Indigenous women to the film and TV industry, and the ongoing work that we're doing. Like, man, there's some amazing female-led projects. That's so exciting. I get so giddy thinking about all these new projects and ideas that are coming out. And I think that's what makes me keep doing this work, is because it's that creative drive. So when I think of ReMATRIATE, I think of honoring and our contributions.
So I'm wondering, what does your daily life look like? Do you have side gigs? What does a daily life look like for you? Kids as well.
Yeah, kids. My kids are actually here. I'm a single mom, so I do everything by myself, and I do it with the strength of all of my ancestors behind me. Yeah, I live a pretty mundane life. It's not that exciting. I make a lot of school lunches, and I write a little note, and I clean a lot. And once my children grow up, I hope that changes. But at the moment, I'm enjoying this mommy life.
Yeah.
I guess we all know when we get to be working, it's great. And so that's my day-to-day right now. But we wrap tomorrow. And then my day-to-day will be, like Maika was saying, just, pretty mundane. Just, I think, hermiting for the winter, the season, and, taking care to just take care of myself and my pup and, eat well, sleep,
catch up on sleep. You know, I'll get so tired when we're working and starting to write.
So envious.
So envious.
Your days are not looking like that.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm a mother as well. I have a 5-year-old son who's now in kindergarten, and I'm a wife, and I have 2 dogs. And so my day-to-day is right now currently training 2 new cast members from Bear Grease. So I, choreograph the show, and then I have to teach the new cast when they come in, and, booking the shows and accommodations. And there's also the business side of it. So I'm in charge of all of that. So I've had to learn, this new skill of like organizing and payroll and, booking and hotels and Airbnbs and, and then teaching the dances and all of that. And then going home and cooking dinner and reading my son his bedtime stories and having mommy time and, cleaning and doing the regular life. And yeah, maybe 3 self-tapes that night and then, doing it all over again the next day. And coming here, being with you beautiful ladies and sharing this space with you, which I'm so grateful. It's chaotic, but I love it. I don't think I could live my life any other way. It's always been like, whoa, juggling.
I feel that.
Yeah, and I think if I wasn't, what would I be doing if I wasn't doing this? I don't know. I think I need a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I feel that. Like for my whole adult life, I've worked with urban Indigenous youth and families through the Friendship Center. I teach dance and also work with Jordan's principal. And that is my day-to-day, but I also am a mom. I audition and I'm trying to get behind the lens. It's like always juggling something.
Yeah.
Gosh, all the things. So then what kind of motivates you all to keep doing this work?
It's my children that, I love my kids. If you know anything, a little bit about me, I'll literally do anything for those kids. But I work so hard because I just want to give them every single opportunity that I never got a chance to have. And I want to be a good example to show them what hard work looks like. I mean, the paycheck doesn't hurt either.
Helps.
Who or what inspires you?
Oh, goodness. So many things inspire me. It's not just one person or a thing. I feel like people who have paved the way and who are bosses and who, that inspires me. I want to be like that. I want to be in those positions where you're creating opportunities for people, people of color, women, of course, my family. And something inside of me, I feel like, I would say, is it selfish? Is it I feel just inspired. I just want to create. I just want to, it's like
Because you're creative.
Yeah.
You need that. You need art.
Yeah. You just feel like you have to do it. It's in you. It's inside, right? So I feel like I inspire myself. Is that okay to say that?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and just wanting to make successful projects and work. Yeah.
I feel like when I'm acting, I feel like I come alive, and it's that feeling makes me wanting to keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm inspired by so many people and women and one in particular, Gail Maurice, queer actor, director, writer. And I'm shouting her out, not because she has many talents, because that set felt like a second home. And the way that she gave notes, it wasn't just yelling behind the monitor, do this, do that. Like she'd come to you, she'd talk to you one-on-one. She'd give you, stories and notes that drew out, really great performances from the actors. And yeah, I want to be a filmmaker like that.
Star?
The work fills my cup. I love being inspired by the work, by, I guess, curiosity in general. Very curious about kind of everything, and yeah.
And what do you all think you would like to see changed in the industry?
I would like to see more diversity within our on screen. There's so much diversity within our Indigenous communities. Like, look at all of us women sitting here. We all look different. And because of my work with youth, I work with youth of all different backgrounds, Indigenous and Black, Indigenous and mixed with another ethnic group. And sometimes the sentiment with those youth are, I don't feel enough. I don't feel Indigenous enough. But I think that's why representation is so important, and I'd love to see it. And my background is, I'm Anishinaabe on my mom's side and Guyanese, and predominantly Black on my father's side. And I didn't see, a lot of Black and Indigenous characters on screen. So, we all look different, and I think it does a disservice to only portray Indigenous people one way, to look one way. I think that does a disservice to the film industry.
We need more content. We need more, we need a Indigenous hot action chick flick. We need more sitcoms. I mean, if you look at the pie of cinema, television, and theater, 100% pie. Indigenous people take up less than 1%. I mean, really, less than 1%. I mean, we have a couple of shows right now, and it's not enough. We need more. We need a sitcom on primetime television. We just need more content. We need more Indigenous directors and writers that are given a chance to get those big machines behind us, supporting us. I can't wait.
Yeah. I like how you mentioned that we need like a chick flick or something. I find that now what I really want to see is Indigenous, funny, happy stories, because our histories are so complex, and it is really important to teach the hard lessons and to learn as much as we can. But I don't want people to be kind of wrapped in this trauma porn of, I want them to realize that indigeneity is beautiful and it can be celebrated. And
I agree. A lot of stories, of course, they're tied to our indigeneity. But what if a character just happens to be Indigenous?
Indigeneity being a layer, and it not being necessarily always the focal point, which is a beautiful thing and has the space. But it would be really sick to just watch something like, kick ass and just be like, oh, and she is Indigenous,
right?
And also to your point of just, we're so funny, we know how to celebrate, we there's so much joy and like a fierce joy to being a Native person. And I think having the opportunity to kind of explore that a bit more, and in a bigger way, like you were talking about, would be sick too.
We need a Kill Bill.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Be sick. Female written, directed. We do our own stunts. I mean, martial arts, guns, high-speed chases, the whole nine. Yeah. With amazing storyline, right? Yeah. Flex the acting.
And then, I feel like you've been on a lot of different sets. What's one of your biggest lessons that you've learned on set?
I remember, there's certain things that you learn just from being on set that you won't learn in any acting class or school. Things like continuity. This may sound silly, but like if you're smoking a cigarette, if you have a choice, don't do it. Eating. I watched myself once on this thing and I was like, why didn't anybody tell me this? Taking a bite of the sandwich, and now you have to take a bite every single time you say the word and it has to look exactly the same. Like things like that, right? That you're gonna be embarrassed watching yourself later on, like, oh, I wish somebody would have told me that. Things like you have to remember your dialogue, and then you also have to hit your mark, and you have to look to the left on this word, otherwise the continuity is gonna be up. Things like that, right? That you only learn doing it, so.
I think for me, one of the biggest things, and I think I'm kind of coming into this lesson and I'm constantly reminded of this one, being a supportive partner to whoever you're working with. I think that comes a bit more naturally to me, to be supportive and hold the space for the person that I'm sharing the space with. But a really cool thing that I've recently learned is like, oh, I can hold that space for myself. And I just kind of recognized this in the last couple of years of working. I was like, oh, that I can do for myself as well. And it's just been really interesting.
Anyone else?
If you're doing any kind of intimacy scenes with people, reading your writers and speaking to your directors and people on set, just making sure that you're aware of what to do and what not to do. Because it's such a gray area that they don't cover in school, that they don't cover like your agent doesn't sit you down and talk to you about these intimacy scenes that you're going to be doing with a person, and it's very personal. So talking with people about that, if you have that in your character, in your scenes.
I think a lesson that I've learned is finding my voice, like not being afraid to ask questions. You know, if I'm unclear on a direction, you know, ask for clarification. Don't be so scared that, you know, you curl up. Yeah, so I think it's really finding my voice and advocating for myself and asking the questions when I'm upset and being comfortable to do so. That's something, you know, that I've been finding and will continue hopefully to find with each project, because I think it's important. Acting and filmmaking is a collaborative experience, so you should be able to ask questions. And
Absolutely. And then what has been the best lesson you have ever learned?
Check your ego at the door.
Yeah.
There's so much that you learn constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard question.
Yeah, it is.
Really.
I would have a hard time.
I mean, I learn something new every time I work.
Mhm.
You know, every time I work, I want to be a sponge. I want to learn. Yeah, I just learn every time on the set of like everything of how to be, again, the supportive actor thing, and being there for each other, and watching the director. I want to step into that space too. You know, watching and seeing how things go, and the business side of things, and yeah, so much. That's a loaded one, because it's like
Yeah,
it's not
it's
just one
tough.
thing, right? Yeah.
I feel like one of my lessons is a personal one. It's just how much capacity that I have. This past project that I did, you know, it was my first project as a new mom, and I was wondering, how am I going to get this done? How am I going to learn these lines? And I just, you know, realized how big my capacity can grow and be, and how many hats I can take on. So I guess it was a really affirming experience for me, especially as a new mom, that, you know, moms can do this, you know, women can do this. Like, there's no time limit on your dreams. Like, motherhood does not kill your career. All those things that people say to you, you know, it's not true. It's bullshit. So, yeah.
Amen to that, sister. That is, you know, if I can piggyback, that is, I think when I became a mother, you do. I waited later in my life to have a child because of that, because there's so much fear built around that you can't do both. You know, and when we finally decided to have a child, that is when my career took off, because I didn't have this obsession of, you know, it was just like, and that's when I actually booked the dream role, and that I always wanted, and having a 2-month-old baby in your trailer, and breastfeeding, and learning the lines, and not sleeping. But it's like, you have this fight in you, and you're like, I am going to do this, and I'm going to show you all that I can do it, and I'm going to kick ass at this role, and I'm going to, you know, do better than I ever have.
And you won an award.
Yeah, from that role. I mean, wow, motherhood.
What was the dream role? I know your work, but what was your dream role?
I played Maggie Moody in a show called Trickster.
Yes.
And it was like having an
course. I
eight-course
thought it might be that
meal
one.
as an actor. It wasn't like the ingenue and the cute girl, and it was like multi-dimensional character,
I love that
everything in
performance,
there. And it was just like that one thing that you can sink your teeth into. But also having a 2-month-old baby in your trailer, and doing that, and going back and pumping, and you know, it was like such a superwoman feeling. Of doing that. And so it's not, you can be a mother and be an actor, and a successful one, but it also takes a village. You need support, and good sets will support that. If they really love you, they'll help you out with that.
I've actually had almost the opposite, because my being a single mom and not having any support, I've had to turn down many jobs actually. And so I think that's been really hard to swallow. Even now I can feel like a lump in my throat, guys. But it's been really hard and difficult to navigate that. But finding the right set, the right people behind these projects will understand what it takes. And it usually takes women or them being a parent themselves.
Yeah. Star?
Yeah, I think the best lesson I've learned so far would be really learning how to show up on set in a way that honors myself and everyone else around me, and really taking care to just be human first, you know? I think I was very lucky at the beginning of my career to have so many role models and people to learn off of who carried themselves in such a way on a set as like number 1 or 2 or whatever. And I think that was a really good blueprint for me to absorb. I think that was a really cool lesson because we've all been on sets where people are not, you know, humans first, you know, and it's just not conducive to anything good and not creativity either, you know, not a safe space for everyone to play and do their good work, you know, in front of the camera and behind. So
Do you see that in the work when it comes out and the human first is there and then the work is better?
honestly, I think so. I really think so. I really think I feel it. I see it. I think it's a palpable thing because really I think it's about cultivating a safe space for everybody to play. And you can't play unless it's neutral and it's safe, you know, and that is a group thing. It's collaborative, you know. So I think you can tell.
Oh gosh, I remember my first movie, 9 years old, and I get to the set. I think I booked the role because I cried in the audition. It was a protesting scene, and it was very intense, and I think it was nerves. It was probably a lot of, you know, everything happening, and I nailed it. And I cried in the room and everything, and you know, no more of this and that, and it killed it. It got me the part. So I walk on set, and there is 50 extras there in the protesting scene, and the director says, I mean, this was a long time ago. Okay, this would never happen today, and I froze when I'm supposed to say my line. Okay, cut. Let's do it again. I think 5 or 6 times, and the director says, cut, and he walks up to me. And he screams at me and he goes, Crystle Lightning, why did I hire you? Okay, action. He made me cry. To get the shot, he comes up to me afterwards and says, I am so sorry I made you cry, but I had to get you there. Just screams at the top of his lungs and completely humiliates me, you know. But yeah, that wasn't a very safe space, was it? But, you know, he got his shot. I'm 9 years old, completely devastated. And, you know, I went back to the craft service and I stuffed my mouth with like 10 Oreos and I felt better.
Oh my
It's like, yeah, it was a long time ago, but man.
All right. So as a safer set, more respect, better product. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Of course.
Of course. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.